Welcome to another episode of the Business of Coaching Workshop. I'm your host, Andrew Jackson, a strength and nutrition coach at Barbell Logic and the co founder of TurnKey Coach, a software platform that enables you to streamline your operations and deliver a coaching and client experience that makes it fun for you and for your clients. I'm excited today to kick off the first of a three-part series titled "How to Keep Clients Longer." And in this series, we're going to be digging into things that we've learned from coaching at Barbell Logic for over a decade and talking to gym owners and online coaches all over the world to share with you some principles and best practices for how to address some of the most costly and insidious aspects of running a coaching business, which is retaining clients. The industry average for fitness coaches is, for churn, that is, somewhere around 8 to 10%. So if you try to imagine the impact on the business, if you're losing 8 to 10% of your clients, you have a leaky bucket that's putting more and more pressure on your sales and marketing. And it's very popular to talk about sales and marketing because it's the sort of superficial first line of defense that you have for growing and maintaining your business. The first thing we started out trying to answer in this podcast or in this workshop was how to get more clients. And that's very natural because if clients leave, your first thought is, well, how do I get more? Here's the dark side of growing with a leaky bucket of churn in the 8 to 10 or more percent. I was just listing industry averages. If you think about the bell curve, you're going to have some out there with much higher churn than that. The dark side of churn in a growing business is that the more clients you get, the more clients you're going to lose with that same churn rate. And if you aren't proactively and aggressively looking for ways to reduce your churn and retain clients longer and increase the lifetime value of your client, then you're going to be fighting this never-ending uphill battle of trying to get more clients as you grow. Rather than if you can knock your churn down by 50% or more and try to keep clients longer, takes a lot of pressure off of your sales and marketing engine, which can be a very costly process. So we're not just speaking on this topic because we read a book and we think it's important. At Barbell Logic, our churn is typically between 2.5% to 4%. It averages out in usually around the 3% range. So we're keeping clients for years. I would say more than half of my roster right now is in the 1,000, is what we call our BL1K, or Barbell Logic 1,000 member club. And average client life cycle for me is somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range. Very common for somebody to stay with a Barbell Logic coach for years, and which enables us to maintain hundreds of clients on our Barbell Logic roster without having to go get another 100 clients every year. So in this three-part series, we're going to be approaching it from three parts. Number one is going to be fixing the foundation. And at the end of each part, we're going to also have a deliverable for you, basically a homework assignment. So we, in the spirit of a workshop, give you something that you can go back to your business and reflect on how you might be able to take some of these lessons learned and apply it to your situation. So first part will be fix the foundation, program continuity checklist. Part two will be stopping avoidable churn. The retention playbook will be the deliverable out of that. And part three will be expand responsibly with a deliverable called whiteboards to workflows, which basically breaks the workshop, this three-part series, down into starting with what you're doing now and reflecting on how your programming influences your client lifecycle, how to use your programming options and your service model to avoid churn. And then once we've got that solid foundation of programming continuity and churn reduction, the third part is to leverage these tools and these processes to even enable you to expand your business further. Now, obviously, we're speaking from the perspective of TurnKey Coach, which is an all-in-one platform that is going to enable you to be able to deliver on all three of these. So starting with programming as the foundation before retention or growth is really critical, because if you can fix programming first, everything else gets easier. And what we're going to be talking about here is not what most people argue about on the internet when it comes to programming. If any of you, which I'm sure you have, if you're listening to this podcast, have spent time on social media, you've seen the debates. Linear progression, periodization, block periodization, west side, conjugate method, optimal set and rep prescriptions, which exercise is going to be the best for hypertrophy, volume versus intensity. Like all of these debates about the X's and O's of exercise selection, sets, reps, volume, intensity are certainly important aspects of programming, but it's not usually the thing that's going to make the difference between whether your service is consistent, repeatable, and retain your clients. It's very rare that I've lost a client and thought in hindsight, man, if only I had chosen a different set and rep scheme, that one would have stayed longer. So what we're talking about and who this is for, before we jump into more details, are in-person gym owners who want to scale systems without losing what makes them great, ops-minded coaches who want to reduce friction and raise quality. So we're not just working faster and harder, we're working with higher quality. And anyone out there who feels like they're feeling busy but brittle. So are their operations requiring a lot of juggling, manual steps, or execution pieces that you have to maintain open loops in your mind all the time? We have a great coach or quote here from Coach John Gaglione that hybrid coaching increases retention and client lifetime value. But first, you need systems that let you scale while staying connected. So if you don't think about and reflect on your coaching or your operations or fulfillment, some people call them services, and make them more repeatable and sustainable, it's going to be really hard to ever grow and get out of working in the trenches on those aspects of the business. So where does programming quietly fail? A couple of different ways we found. One could be in knowledge gaps. So this is where you've got programming assumptions that aren't documented or taught. This could be true for an individual coach, or it could be true for a team of coaches. So if you are making assumptions about your knowledge or your client's knowledge and not writing it down, then you could be over time creating larger and larger gap between what your client needs and wants and what you're actually delivering. This is particularly true if you've got a team of coaches and no system for making programming repeatable or in a way of documenting. So some people are literally, still to this day, I talk to coaches who are writing their programs down on a whiteboard when the clients come in, and maybe the client has a notebook, maybe they don't. Recently talked to somebody who's still writing their programs on a Google Sheet for their personal hard drive and then printing them out, but it's really difficult for other people in the gym to see what the programs are or what the programs are based on. So having consistent basis for how you're programming, what you're programming, and why you're programming can create gaps that quietly fail your clients. Another huge one is transition gaps. This might be where hybrid coaching can be the most powerful, and we'll talk again about this more in part 2, but being able to continue serving your clients as they go through different phases in their life or different phases in their training advancement is where you can very quickly and unexpectedly find yourself in a situation where a solution that was working really well for a client no longer works. And it can literally happen overnight. And depending on how your relationship is with the client or how much your process anticipates changes, it can completely catch you off guard. Some of those things can be as simple as changing a job. Could be as big as having a baby, bringing a child into the life. Could be moving across town or, just or into a different state. It could be something changing in your life. Anytime where there's something changing either in your life or your client's life or in your gym community's life, there's an opportunity for there to be a failure. And what's interesting about these gaps, all of them, but I think the transition one in particular, is that they're often things that people might not recognize as at the full impact of how it's going to affect their life. And so it only comes up as a reason for stopping a service when the pain becomes apparent after the transition. So if you don't have a process for either staying connected with when these transitions are happening or going to happen, or more importantly, being able to flex your service to be able to support those transitions, then we have a quiet failure. Template traps is another huge one in our industry. This was a big problem that we had, I think, early on at Barbell Logic when we weren't template driven per se. I mean, we've never really been big on using a lot of templates, although we have that feature, obviously. Custom programming has always been a core tenet. However, we did have a fairly limited set of programming frameworks that we would use as a client progressed, and there were very hard cutoff points. So if somebody started out as a linear progression, then they would go to something like a Texas method, and then they would go to something like maybe 5-3-1, and then they would go to something like block periodization or whatever major framework. And they were these kind of wholesale program shifts. We didn't have a way to kind of seamlessly manage the program so that as the client progressed and maybe progressed in different ways, we could modify the program to meet their needs. Then Matt and Scott came up with and really started talking about this idea of minimum effective dose, where we could tweak individual variables and the program could flow continuously with good continuity for the client, so that they could continue to make progress without feeling like they were having to make these big template changes or, stuck in these programming structures that felt like you were having to completely overhaul the program. And there would always be these like kind of panic moments where you get towards the end of making progress on a program and you got to figure out, okay, well, which one am I going to go run now? If you have a sustainable and systematic programming system, it's like MED. There are still times where you have to overhaul the program, but you can very seamlessly with MED move a client through different exercises, different set and rep schemes, different priorities, and evolve the program with them as their needs change, rather than being overly reliant on picking the next template off the shelf and trying to force feed that to a client. On the other hand, there can also be a bit of a dark side with MED, that if you're just constantly tweaking without having a guiding framework, then it can sometimes drift into or feel like there's just random changes being made to the program without having any kind of direction or purpose. So all of these combined can lead to a situation where you've got some combination of the client or the coach drifting apart in terms of having a shared vision for what the program is trying to accomplish. The coach potentially being burned out because they're having to juggle all of these different knowledge gaps or transition gaps or template transitions or figuring out which tweak to make. and then ultimately retention suffers. So, in order to maintain programming continuity, we want to fundamentally have a consistent training experience, and ideally, whether the coach is present or not, across different phases, formats, and even team members as you continue to grow. And that is going to require documented, transferable, and scalable programming. By documented, that means you're going to need to have a place where the program is written down. For a lot of you, that might sound obvious and basic, especially if you're listening to this podcast and hopefully using TurnKey Coach. But there are probably a lot of you out there listening who might not have a process for retaining and documenting, or if you do, like I said, it might be one of those situations where it's on a Google spreadsheet, or it's in literally a file cabinet, or somebody's training book. Not only does it need to be documented, but ideally you've got a mechanism for recording the decisions that you make. An example in TurnKey Coach is that we have the ability to create notes on a workout day, in the client book, on the client calendar, where you can store all the things, documents, pictures, onboarding questionnaires, waivers, MRI screenshots. If you want anything related to that customer journey, you can save in one place so that when you're working on the program, it's all accessible. So it's not just writing down, again, the exercises, sets, reps, and weight. You also want to be able to document their why. You want to document the equipment they have. You want to have a history of their injuries. You want to have a place where you can record what decision-making process you made. Because eventually you're going to want to be able to transfer that to another coach. That might not sound like the most urgent need for you if you're starting out an emerging coach and you've only got 4 or 5 clients. But if you're trying to run a gym, or if you're trying to grow your business into 50, 60, 70, 100 clients, at some point you're going to want to be able to have enough documentation that the program can be transferable to your team, or to somebody who's going to help you manage the client. Or maybe even another component of this could be that at some point you want your client to be able to take over their coaching journey. We have a feature within TurnKey Coach, for example, where the client can coach themselves. And it's very helpful and useful to be able to offer that service for them to be able to also see what all of the decisions were that were made, to include what their PR history is, their recent history. All of those notes I was mentioning that were useful for you as a coach could also be useful for the client as they take on more responsibility of their training. Then finally, you want your solution, your programming continuity solution, to be scalable. This is where a lot of the features in TurnKey Coach have come from, to enable a coach to handle more clients without having to use more mental bandwidth. Some very simple examples of that are the programming reminders, or the missed workout reminders, or the birthday notifications, the ability to getting notifications and managing your notification settings so that you get a Connect page notification when a client has completed a workout, commented on a workout, submitted a video. All of these things they might sound simple, but particularly when you're working in an asynchronous environment, they are really powerful for helping you take mental load off of your, that loop, those mental loops in the back of your mind, trying to keep track of all the things that your clients need. Instead, you can go to one place and have those all clearly laid out, so that when you start your coaching for the day, you open up the laptop, work through your notifications, put it away, and you can rest assured that all of your clients are taken care of. You haven't dropped the ball. I can't tell you how many times early on when we were doing this without TurnKey Coach that I didn't realize a client went an entire week without or without completing a workout, or that a client commented on a workout and I didn't get the notification, or or I missed their birthday, or any number of administrative things that when you have a small number of clients, you can keep that all in your head. It's all that's on your mind, and it's fairly easy to manage. But when you start getting to 5, 10, 15, 20, 60, 70 clients, you need systems that are going to scale so that quality remains high even as the volume increases. So one of the most powerful things that you can add to your retention and your programming offering is a online only or an asynchronous only service. These don't work well for everybody, and one of the common questions that we get, or the maybe misconceptions, myths that we get from people that are asking about how to start online coaching, is that it feels like they have to start up a big social media page and do a huge online marketing campaign. But what we've found from gym owners like Marty Jacobs, who's quoted here, is that rather than having to create a big social media influencer kind of presence, it becomes a tool that enables programming continuity for their existing clients. For example, here are some gaps that we've already talked about. A client moves, travels, their schedule changes, their budget shifts. They still want to train, but maybe they aren't seeing quite as much value as they did initially because you've taught them how to move well and they're not needing as much hands-on coaching. Client becomes more self-sufficient but still wants structure. So often clients, as they progress in their training, advance more. They have more understanding of the variables of their training and they can make more decisions on the fly, but they might still want the coach or a coach who maintains a program plan for them or helps them think through their plan over a long course of time, where the client feels comfortable day to day making adjustments on the fly, but they still want that coach oversight. And we have coaches at Barbell Logic who've been training for 15, 20 plus years, and they still have a coach because it's hard to objectively coach yourself, but it's hard to also rationalize the same price point when all you're getting is, or not all, but when you're getting less of that touch time that you need and value early on, when the day-to-day movement needs feedback, every little detail of the program needs to be managed, and you're obviously spending a lot more time working directly with that client. And then again, bridging during life transitions. We have clients all the time who start out working in person at a gym, but maybe again, like they have a kid or they have a job change, whatever the situation. Having the ability to offer a online or a hybrid solution is a huge opportunity to retain your clients longer. And as you can see from the quote here, Marty's actually found that his engagement with online clients increased when he was able to offer a remote coaching service, because he went from some of his clients he only saw once or 2 or 3 times a week to being able to touch base with them every single day without having to be in the same place in the same time. So we'll talk more about how to set this up, but the gym owners and the coaches that I've talked to that have managed it best don't treat online coaching like a separate business model that they have to build. They still focus on their core business model, typically personal training, some combination of personal training and semi-private, small group training. But then the online coaching or the hybrid coaching options become a way of maintaining continuity of programming during their in-person training, during their personal training or their small group training, where then hybrid coaching becomes a natural extension, a natural next step where the groundwork has already been laid, where they've received their programming, they've uploaded videos, they maybe even have gotten some feedback in addition to their in-person session, and then they're ready for that moment when an asynchronous or a hybrid option is the better solution, whether it's a price point or a time constraint. Now you have a solution that you can naturally transition them to without having to lose them for one of those reasons. So our call to action and our takeaway for this episode is to go to our Fix the Foundation Programming Continuity Checklist. We should have a link for this somewhere. If I don't get it to you by the end of this episode, we'll post it in the show notes. And we might be able to grab it here while we're doing our Q&A at the end. But that is the presentation for part 1. Like I said, we'll be following up with part 2 and 3. You really don't want to miss part 2. I got a sneak peek at the deliverable, the homework assignment for next week, and it is extremely good and very tactically practical. It will give you tools, scripts, and objection handling to help transition your clients into a hybrid solution, if that's what you're looking for. So if you are interested in taking a look at the programming continuity checklist, I highly recommend it. I hope you think through where you might have gaps in your programming. Go to turnkey.coach/programming-checklist. That's turnkey.coach/programming-checklist. And it'll take you about 45 seconds to a minute. Fill out the Q&A and get some feedback on where you might have some opportunity to make your programming a stronger foundation for you and your clients. With that, I'll open it up to questions. Maybe we'll get Mac back on the show. What do you think, sir? You've been talking to a lot of coaches out there over the last few months as basically our tip of the spear sales leader. What are you seeing from a programming perspective? Again, not the X's and O's, but from a sustainability perspective for both clients and coaches when you're talking to folks out there that are interested in growing or scaling their business.
Sure. From personal experience, I remember swapping from paper and pencil notebooks to a consolidated platform. That in itself is a huge jump, where you'll teach yourself to do it. So you'll start programming for your clients, and you'll be entering things in their notebooks. Maybe you teach your clients to do that, but then suddenly when you have this consolidated piece, not only are you typing faster, and you're probably taking your programming, what's the word I'm looking for? The glut of programming that you do that takes you hours, you're condensing that down because you're fast. But then your clients potentially start to get involved more as well, because now they're inputting their thing and they can start tracking and seeing things that they don't have to leaf through a book anymore and go and grab the old notebook from years previous. It's all in one place. But the other piece as well, the binge programming, that's the word I was looking for. That's another huge piece where
the Sunday night
you don't sacrifice
scramble.
The weekend hours to get everything in place for next week. That's gone.
I so vividly remember Sunday afternoon. So like basically the entire Sunday afternoon. And for not many clients, like 10 or 15 clients, it would take me hours.
And remember, you mentioned before the program swap, because you didn't have anything to bridge when you came to the end of your program. And so you'd be like, okay, I now need to sit for these 10 clients, figure out a brand new program, because you didn't have that MED system. Whereas now, it's all there, it's smooth, and you're just chipping away at it within your framework, so it doesn't get lost and become chaotic.
Right.
I think that's huge. So if I was to sum that up, time comes back.
Plug for the Academy, Barbell Logic Academy, where you can deep dive into that programming philosophy. I honestly think the MED framework was the biggest programming improvement that I experienced from the template trap gap that we talked about to having a programming system And I think this is actually, it's been interesting as we've seen more coaches outside of our Barbell Logic bubble come through TurnKey Coach, and especially when we were helping people set up their templates, and you see different programming styles. My head exploded a few times when I saw some of the programs come through where there's a system there. You can tell they're putting a lot of thought and effort into it, but the ROI for that level of effort and the client, what they would have to do to be able to wrap their head around it and actually execute it it gets really hard to scale.
Yeah, I think programming is a universal language. I think that's the common ground that we see with all coaches, is because programming is fundamental to the client relationship. You need to tell your client what you want them to do, but within any language, there's a million dialects. And I think with what we're seeing now is there's a simplification, there's a unification of a lot of these dialects where people say, oh, I can present it this way. And that becomes standardized. And I think there's a little bit of a eureka moment there where someone who cares a lot about programming realizes, this is more efficient. This still communicates what I want. It's more easily readable. It's more easily inputable and controllable and sustainable across the board. So yeah, I think there's a bit of unification in terms of programming for sure.
Yeah. Well, we are at the top of the hour. I don't see any chat coming in. I don't know if there's anything on the other channels, Dan, but if not, we'll call it a day and tune in next week for part 2. And we'll learn more about how to retain clients longer. And like I said, this one's going to be really good. Very excited about this. So we will see you next week on the Business of Coaching Workshop.